Every summer, families head into the wild to relax, reconnect, and escape. But some never come back. These are the three most chilling disappearances that began with a simple camping trip and ended in mystery. Case 1, Yuba County 5. It was the night of February 24, 1978 in Chico, California. 5 friends, Gary Mathias, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Ted Wire, and Jack Hewitt were buzzing with excitement. The men, all in their 20s and early 30s, had just watched a college basketball game at California State University and were now expected to return home to Yuba City, a drive of just over an hour. But they never made it back. The group, sometimes called the Boys, despite being adults, all had mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions. They were close friends bonded by routine shared interests and a local basketball league for developmentally disabled adults. Gary Mathias, a former Army serviceman, was being treated for schizophrenia, but had been stable for 2 years. Ted Wire was described as shy but kind. Bill, Jack, and Jack were all considered dependable and good-natured. After the game ended around 10 p.m., the 5 men got into Jack Madruga's turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. Witnesses saw them stop at a local convenience store in Chico shortly after midnight. They bought snacks, milk, soda, Hostess pies. Everything about the stop was normal. Then they vanished. 2 days later, the Mercury was found abandoned on a remote mountain road in Plumas National Forest, deep in the woods near Oroville. The car was 70 miles off course from their expected route home. What baffled investigators was that the car showed no signs of mechanical failure. It had enough gas. Yet it had been inexplicably left behind, parked neatly along the side of the snowy road. Snowdrifts around the car suggested it had been stuck, but strangely, the undercarriage wasn't damaged. Any of the men could have easily pushed it free, and Jack Madruga, a careful man, would never have driven into such terrain willingly. The police were stumped. In the weeks that followed, helicopters, snowcats, and search teams scoured the wilderness. But deep snow, steep ravines, and thick forest made the search nearly impossible. No trace of the men could be found. Days turned into weeks, then months. On June 4th, 1978, over 4 months later, motorcyclists passing through the area discovered a broken Forest Service trailer located 20 miles from where the car had been found. Inside, they found the body of Ted Wire. Ted was stretched out on a bed in the trailer. His beard suggested he had survived for 8 to 13 weeks after the initial disappearance, but he had lost nearly 100 pounds. Strangely, canned food and matches were in the cabin, yet none had been opened. His feet were frostbitten, and his shoes were missing. Someone had wrapped his body in sheets tucked in tightly, almost lovingly. Nearby, searchers later found the remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, both outside the trailer, partially eaten by animals. Jack Hewitt's bones were discovered off the road a few miles away. But Gary Mathias, the only one with schizophrenia, was never found. Only his sneakers were located in the trailer, suggesting he may have left barefoot in the snow. The scene raised more questions than it answered. Why had the men abandoned a working car? Why did they hike 20 miles uphill through snow with no winter gear to reach a locked trailer? Why had no one opened the canned food or used the propane stove inside? Some investigators believed the group had been frightened by something or someone and fled. Others speculated that Gary Mathias, due to his condition, may have had a psychotic break and influenced the group's decisions. But nothing could be proven. Theories bloomed. Was it foul play? A case of shared delusion? One local man claimed to have seen the group with another man the night they vanished, but the lead went cold. Others spoke of UFO sightings near the forest. Rumors of military testing and secret facilities in the area swirled, adding to the growing mystery. The parents were devastated. Gary Mathias's family believed he was still alive, possibly hiding in the wilderness or on the run. Ted Wyer's mother was tormented by the idea that her son had sat starving in a cabin with food and heat at his fingertips. For decades, the case has remained unsolved. No one knows what happened that night after they left the store in Chico. No one knows why 5 grown men familiar with responsibility and routine wandered into a snow-covered forest in the middle of the night. To this day, the case of the Yuba County 5 remains one of California's most baffling unsolved disappearances. The image of Ted Wyer's body in a trailer surrounded by untouched supplies still haunts those who've read the reports. Gary Mathias's fate is a ghost story in itself, and the questions linger. What scared them off the road? Why did they climb into the mountains? Why didn't they survive when they could have? No one knows. Case 2. Dennis Martin. It was Father's Day weekend, June 14, 1969, when the Martin family headed into the misty expanse of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. For Bill Martin, it was a tradition to mark the occasion with a summer camping trip, and this time, he brought along his sons, Doug and Dennis, and his own father, Clyde Martin. Their destination, Cades Cove, a lush green valley on the Tennessee side of the park, known for its wildlife hiking trails and remote beauty. Dennis Martin was 6 years old. Small, with dark hair and an infectious smile, he wore a bright red shirt, green shorts, and new Oxford shoes that day. He was excited, cheerful, and full of energy, ready to play and explore the wilderness with his older brother and cousin. The family set out on foot, following a trail to Spence Field, a high-elevation, grassy clearing near the Appalachian Trail. It was a popular spot for campers and offered panoramic views of the Smoky Mountains. Along the way, the Martins encountered another family with children close in age. The two groups decided to camp near each other and let the boys play together. Around 4:30 p.m., the children came up with a plan. They would sneak up on the adults and try to startle them. It was a game, just innocent fun. Dennis, always the eager participant, ran into the woods to loop around behind them. He vanished into the trees just yards away. But Dennis never came out the other side. At first, no one panicked. Maybe he got turned around. Maybe he stopped to tie his shoes. The minutes ticked by. His father called for him first, casually, then louder. Then again. Soon, the entire camp was echoing with Dennis's name. Nothing. Bill Martin ran 2 miles down the trail to try and intercept Dennis if he had somehow gone the wrong direction. Clyde Martin ran in the opposite direction, deeper into the woods. Still nothing. The forest swallowed him whole. That night, a storm moved in, one of the worst June storms in years. Nearly 3 inches of rain fell, flooding creeks and washing away footprints, scents, and clues. Lightning split the sky. Temperatures dropped. Whatever chance Dennis had of surviving alone shrank dramatically. By dawn, rangers from the National Park Service had joined the effort. What began as a family search turned into a massive rescue operation. Bloodhounds were brought in, but quickly lost Dennis's scent. Helicopters flew grid patterns overhead. Searchers combed miles of rugged terrain. Within 72 hours, over 1,400 people were involved: park rangers, volunteers, members of the Green Berets from Fort Bragg, even psychics. It became the largest search in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains. But despite the overwhelming manpower, not a single trace of Dennis Martin was found. No footprints, no torn fabric, no food wrappers, nothing. Then, an unsettling report emerged. On the same day, Dennis went missing. A family hiking near Rowan's Creek, approximately 6 miles from Spence Field, reported hearing a sickening scream. Moments later, they claimed to see a rough-looking man moving through the brush, carrying something in his arms. He was disheveled, barefoot, and wore what looked like a tattered brown jacket. At first, they thought it was an injured animal. But then, they saw the red flash what looked like a piece of clothing. It could have been a red shirt. The sighting was never confirmed. Some dismissed it as coincidental, others weren't so sure. The terrain between Rowan's Creek and Spence Field is steep, wild, and nearly impassable. Could someone have moved that fast? Or had Dennis been taken? As the days turned into weeks, hope began to wither. Rumors swirled about feral mountain men, rogue kidnappers, or even supernatural forces. Some speculated about Bigfoot. Local legends spoke of strange disappearances in these woods of travelers who vanished without a sound. Park officials resisted these ideas. Their official position was that Dennis had likely succumbed to the elements, fallen into a ravine, or been attacked by a wild animal. But that theory never explained the total absence of remains or belongings. Bill Martin never accepted the official narrative. He returned to the park dozens of times, searching trails, ravines, and riverbeds. He knocked on ranger station doors with maps, notes, and fresh theories. He believed someone had taken his son, and that Dennis might still be out there. In 1985, a man came forward with a disturbing revelation. While illegally hunting ginseng in the backwoods, he claimed to have stumbled upon a small skull and child's skeletal remains in Big Hollow, roughly 3 miles from where Dennis had disappeared. Fearing legal trouble, he said nothing for years. When authorities finally searched the area, no bones were found. But the damage was done. Another possible answer had slipped away. For the Martin family, there was no closure. Dennis's disappearance shattered the illusion of safety that parks like the Smokies represented. It raised uncomfortable questions about wilderness preparedness, law enforcement coordination, and the limits of even the largest search efforts. The media eventually moved on. But for the Martins, and for those who had walked shoulder to shoulder through the forest for days, it never truly ended. To this day, the disappearance of Dennis Martin remains one of the most haunting cold cases in U.S. national park history. It is cited in books, documentaries, and countless forums. Internet sleuths debate every inch of the map. Some believe he died of exposure. Others are convinced he was taken. A few believe the truth lies somewhere deeper beyond logic. In the cool mist of Spence Field, where tall grass sways and shadows dance under ancient trees, the memory of a little boy in a red shirt lingers. And in the deep quiet of the Smoky Mountains, the question remains unanswered. Where did Dennis Martin go? Case 3. DeOrr Coons Jr. It was a warm summer morning, July 10, 2015, when 2-year-old DeOrr Coons Jr. disappeared without a trace in the rugged wilderness near Leodore, Idaho. What was meant to be a short family camping trip quickly turned into one of the most perplexing missing person cases in recent American history. DeOrr had traveled with his parents, Jessica Mitchell and Vernal DeOrr Kunz Sr., as well as his great-grandfather, Robert Walton, and a family friend named Isaac Reinwand. Their destination was Timber Creek Campground, a remote forested area near the Salmon Chalice National Forest, isolated, quiet, and several miles from the nearest town. The group arrived in the morning. According to the parents, they spent the early part of the day setting up the site and introducing DeOrr to the surroundings. The toddler wore a camouflage jacket, blue pajama pants, and cowboy boots, his small frame dwarfed by the towering trees and uneven terrain. DeOrr was said to be cheerful, running between the adults, playing with rocks and exploring the edge of camp. At around 2:30 p.m., Jessica and Vernal said they decided to drive back down the road to a nearby stream, hoping to catch fish. DeOrr, they claimed, didn't want to go and instead stayed behind at the campsite with his great-grandfather, who sat in a chair under the shade of a pine tree. Vernal and Jessica said they were gone for only 10 to 15 minutes. When they returned, DeOrr was gone. At first they thought he was hiding, perhaps behind a tree or under a bush. They searched the area, calling his name, checking the trailer, the road, the brush. Panic crept in quickly. The grandfather said he hadn't seen the boy wander off. He assumed DeOrr was still nearby the entire time. But now, there was no sign of him. Not even footprints. Within an hour, the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office was contacted. A search and rescue operation began that evening, extending into the night. Dogs were brought in helicopters scanned from above, and dozens of volunteers spread across the dense terrain. Despite the size of the search, no scent trail was found. No clothes, no shoes, nothing. The terrain around Timber Creek was unforgiving steep hillsides, rocky soil, and thick brush. Yet many found it difficult to believe that a 2-year-old could travel far on his own in cowboy boots without leaving behind a single trace. As the days passed, theories began to form. At first, it seemed like a tragic accident. Perhaps the child had fallen into a nearby creek and been swept away. But divers found nothing. Others suspected animal predation, yet no blood or remains were ever discovered. Then the narrative began to shift. Investigators began to question the timeline, the reactions, and the consistency of the parents' stories. Why hadn't anyone seen or heard DeOrr leave? Why were there no tracks? Why did the scent dogs lose his trail only feet from the campsite? The parents gave multiple interviews in the days and weeks following the disappearance. In some, Jessica said she believed DeOrr had been kidnapped. Vernal hinted at the possibility of animal attack, but their accounts often changed slightly enough to raise suspicion among the public and law enforcement. In 2016, private investigator Philip Klein was hired by the family. Within months, Klein stated publicly that he no longer believed the parents were being truthful. He alleged they had failed polygraph tests and that they showed signs of deception. The parents denied these claims, saying they had been cooperative and honest from the beginning. The pressure intensified. In early 2017, the Lemhi County Sheriff made a bold statement. Both Jessica and Vernal were officially named suspects in the disappearance of their son. Though no charges were filed and no physical evidence linked them to foul play, the cloud of suspicion grew darker. Yet even with years of investigation, interviews, aerial searches, and ground teams, there was still no sign of Dior Coons Jr. Rumors circulated. Some believed the boy had never been at the campsite in the first place. Others speculated about a cover-up or a tragic accident that was being hidden. Still others leaned into more outlandish theories, abduction, trafficking, or supernatural explanations tied to the remoteness of the Idaho backcountry. The family fractured under the weight of grief and scrutiny. Jessica and Vernal eventually separated. Interviews became rare, and while many in the public had made up their minds, no resolution came. No body was found. No confession emerged. In the years that followed, the case continued to make headlines in true crime circles, appearing in television specials and podcasts. Despite multiple changes in leadership, the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office never closed the case. 10 years later, the campground still stands quiet, remote, and unchanged. Campers who pass through sometimes leave small toys or flowers near the last known site of the toddler's presence. A camouflage ribbon tied to a branch. A boot-shaped keychain nailed to a tree. Silent tributes to a child who vanished without a sound. The disappearance of DeOrr Coons Jr. remains one of the most haunting cases in Idaho's history. For many, the lack of evidence is what makes it so disturbing. How could a 2-year-old vanish in broad daylight within feet of 4 adults and leave behind nothing? The question still echoes in the pines. Where is DeOrr? 3 cases, 3 trips into the wild. None of them ended the way they were supposed to. Subscribe for more true crime stories that still echo in the dark.